Welcome to a journey through time where history isn't just a memory, but a vivid landscape of events and emotions waiting to be explored anew. The air is thick with dust, the sun a harsh overseer above endless dunes and rugged hills. You're riding across the Arabian Peninsula, its heat prickling your skin, the wind whispering secrets older than empires. Somewhere in this vast desert, a man sharpens his sword, his eyes focused a presence that will soon shake worlds. This is Khalid ibn al-Walid, a name that will become legend. Known as the Sword of God, he rides not just with steel, but with a mind wired for battle and a heart alight with fierce conviction. But you probably won't survive this journey unscathed, so buckle up. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to post your location in local time. I'm always curious where in the world you're tuning in from. Wherever you are, I hope tonight brings you rest, comfort, and maybe a curious dream or two. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is around 632 CE. Muhammad the Prophet has passed away, leaving a community united by faith, but fractured in leadership. Tribes across Arabia question their allegiance, some turning away, some challenging the new order. And in the midst of this uncertainty rides Khalid. He's a formidable warrior from the Quraysh tribe, formerly a fierce opponent of Muhammad, now one of Islam's greatest generals. His charisma is as sharp as his sword, his tactics as unpredictable as desert storms. The Ridda Wars begin a series of campaigns to bring rebellious tribes back under Islamic rule. Khalid moves swiftly, decisively. His forces often outnumbered, yet his victories become almost legendary. You watch him lead cavalry charges that break enemy lines like waves against cliffs. You hear rumors one battle was decided by Khalid's rapid night march, catching enemies asleep, their campfires still glowing. Historians still argue whether Khalid was driven by faith ambition or a complex mix of both. But one thing's clear, his military genius helped preserve a fragile unity in an exploding region. And his methods. Well, let's just say he wasn't above psychological warfare. There's a story that after capturing a rebel leader, Khalid sent his head back to the tribe with a note, "Next time surrender before I arrive." Charming. You feel the desert sand swirl around you as Khalid prepares to ride northward, eyes fixed on new horizons. The Arabian Peninsula, once divided by clan and creed, is on the cusp of transformation. And Khalid is leading the charge. You settle into your saddle as the desert sun casts long shadows across the sand. Khalid ibn al-Walid isn't just a general, he's a force of nature. His reputation precedes him, part warrior, part strategist, part legend. And part, let's be honest, a guy with a hairline so sharp it deserves its own battle story. Born in Mecca, Khalid was initially a fierce opponent of Muhammad and the early Muslims. But everything changed when he converted to Islam, transforming overnight from adversary to one of its most feared champions. He earned the title Saif Allah, the Sword of God, not just for his ferocity, but for his remarkable tactical genius. At the Battle of Mu'tah in 629 CE, facing a vastly superior Byzantine army, Khalid's leadership is credited with saving the Muslim forces from annihilation. You watch him now, orchestrating troops with a commanding presence, his keen eyes scanning the battlefield like a hawk hunting its prey. His cavalry strikes with precision, cutting through enemy lines with the brutal elegance of a scythe through wheat. One quirky tidbit: Khalid was known for his mobile warfare, using lightning-fast cavalry maneuvers to outflank and surprise enemies, accustomed to slower, heavier armies. This style baffled the Byzantines, who were more used to rigid formations and heavy infantry. Another fascinating detail: despite his ferocity, Khalid was a deeply religious man who often sought guidance in prayer before battles, blending faith and warfare in a way that inspired his men. Historians still argue about his role. Was Khalid a brilliant general empowered by divine favor, or a ruthless opportunist exploiting the chaos of his time. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a complex man shaped by faith, ambition, and circumstance. As the sun dips, you realize Khalid's rise is only the beginning. Ahead lies a world reshaped by conquest battles and the shifting tides of empire. And you're right there in the saddle with him. You trudge through the shifting sands, the weight of history pressing gently against your shoulders as the Ridda Wars unfold like a tense desert storm. After Muhammad's death in 632 CE, the fragile unity he forged begins to crack, and many Arabian tribes question their allegiance to the nascent Islamic State. You witness Khalid's swift, ruthless campaigns to bring these renegades back under the banner of Islam. It's not just battles, it's a test of wills, loyalties, and survival. Tribes that once allied turn rebellious, refusing to pay zakat or recognizing the new leadership. Khalid, tasked by Caliph Abu Bakr, moves with brutal efficiency. He lays siege to fortresses, outmaneuvers desert tribes with lightning raids, and doesn't shy away from psychological warfare. One story has him tricking a rebellious leader into surrender by convincing his spies that the Muslim army is far larger than reality, classic ancient bluff. A quirky tidbit: Khalid reportedly used camel cavalry with exceptional skill, adapting traditional desert tactics to create a mobile force that confounded his enemies. His troops could traverse vast distances, quickly striking unexpectedly. Another fringe detail: some rebel tribes reportedly worshipped their own versions of deities and resisted conversion, fiercely leading Khalid's forces to not just fight for territory but for hearts and souls. Historians still argue whether the Ridda Wars were motivated by political consolidation or genuine religious fervor. Some suggest the rebellions were less about faith and more about resisting new taxes and central authority. As you watch the desert sands swirl, Khalid's campaigns remind you that history often turns on the edge of a sword and on the fragile loyalties of desert clans. The stage is set. Khalid's next challenge lies beyond the Arabian sands, facing the mighty Byzantine Empire. You trudge forward, the heat of the desert sun pressing down like an impatient overseer, as the landscape begins to shift beneath your boots. Ahead lies a new horizon, where the rolling sands of Arabia meet the rugged terrain of Syria, the heartland of the Byzantine Empire. This is the edge of worlds, the meeting point of empires old and new, where Khalid ibn al-Walid's next challenge awaits. The Byzantine Empire, heir to the Roman legacy, is a complex tapestry of cities, armies, and ancient traditions. Their legions are disciplined, their fortresses formidable, and their faith deeply woven into the state. Facing them is no small task for the relatively new and untested Muslim forces. But Khalid rides forward with the confidence of a man who has tamed desert storms and rebellious tribes alike. You watch as Khalid's forces move northward, their banners fluttering in the dry breeze, their camels and horses kicking up dust trails that stretch like veins across the barren land. His troops are a motley assembly of desert warriors, some still adjusting to their newfound faith, others eager for glory, and many simply determined to survive. The initial clashes with the Byzantine forces are swift and fierce. Khalid employs tactics that seem almost alien to the heavy infantry and cumbersome cavalry of the Byzantines. His army strikes with lightning speed, using the mobility of camels and horses to harass supply lines and launch surprise raids on outposts. The Byzantines, accustomed to conventional warfare with well-ordered ranks and rigid formations, find themselves outmaneuvered in a terrain that Khalid's troops know intimately. A quirky tidbit: Khalid's forces are said to have used a combination of psychological warfare and clever subterfuge. In one notable incident, they reportedly dressed as Byzantine soldiers to infiltrate a fortress, creating confusion and chaos from within before launching their assault. This blend of guile and speed earns Khalid a fearsome reputation, one that spreads ahead of his troops like wildfire. Another fringe detail: the Muslim forces, though united by faith, are diverse in background. Some warriors come from nomadic tribes skilled in desert survival, while others hail from recently converted communities with limited military experience. Despite this, Khalid molds them into a cohesive fighting force, emphasizing discipline and morale as much as sheer courage. Historians still argue whether Khalid's campaigns were purely military or if they also had diplomatic undertones. Some evidence suggests he negotiated with local leaders and tribes, securing alliances and undermining Byzantine control from within. Others view these efforts as part of a broader strategy of conquest and consolidation. As you journey alongside Khalid, you reach the city of Damascus, a jewel of the Levant, with its ancient walls and bustling markets. The city is a vital prize, both strategically and symbolically. Its fall would mark a significant blow to Byzantine power and open the gates for further expansion. Khalid lays siege to Damascus with characteristic decisiveness. The siege is marked by a combination of direct assaults, cutting off supplies, and psychological tactics designed to wear down defenders. Inside the city, fear and uncertainty grow as news of Khalid's victories elsewhere spread. Then comes the dramatic episode that will be etched into history and legend. Faced with a stubborn Byzantine commander and a city unwilling to surrender, Khalid engineers a daring nighttime assault. Legend has it, he slipped through the city's defenses under cover of darkness, entering through a secret gate or using forged documents. Stories vary depending on the source. Once inside, he coordinates with sympathetic factions and loyalists, opening the gates to his waiting forces. The city falls with surprising swiftness. Khalid's reputation as both a brilliant strategist and a ruthless commander is cemented, but the siege leaves its scars. There are tales of betrayal, harsh punishments for dissenters, and negotiations that strain the limits of honor and pragmatism. Your first quirky tidbit: it's said that during the siege, Khalid reportedly saved Damascus by personally confronting an assassin sent to kill him in his tent. Whether this is fact or myth, it adds to the almost cinematic quality of his campaigns. Another fascinating detail: Damascus, a melting pot of cultures, religions, and languages, becomes a microcosm of the broader transformation sweeping the region. Byzantine officials, Christian clergy, and local Arabs all find themselves navigating the uncertain new order under Muslim rule. As you reflect on the fall of Damascus, you realize this isn't just a military conquest. It's the beginning of a profound cultural and religious shift, the first major foothold of the rapidly expanding Muslim state beyond the Arabian Peninsula. Khalid's campaigns continue pushing deeper into Byzantine territory, setting the stage for the climactic confrontation at the Yarmouk River. The desert winds carry whispers of war, faith, and destiny, and Khalid rides onward, sword-ready eyes fixed on the horizon. The sun blazes relentlessly as you press onward, the landscape changing subtly but unmistakably wider plains, replacing the jagged hills, the scent of unfamiliar herbs carried on the dry breeze. You are approaching the battlefield that will define an era, the plains near the Yarmouk River, where the Muslim forces under Khalid ibn al-Walid prepare to face the massive Byzantine army. The Yarmouk campaign is not just a battle, it's a struggle for the soul of the Levant. You watch as two worlds collide: Byzantine soldiers in their gleaming armor, disciplined and confident, arrayed in formations perfected over centuries. Opposite them, the Muslim forces, smaller in number but fierce, agile, and resolute. Khalid is everywhere on horseback, riding the lines, inspiring his men, adjusting tactics on the fly. His cavalry weaves like a desert wind, striking from unexpected angles, testing the enemy's defenses. The battle begins with probing attacks and feints. Dust rises like ghosts as horses thunder. Arrows whistle and swords clash in brutal symphony. The Byzantines rely on their heavy infantry and war elephants to break the Muslim lines, while Khalid counters with light cavalry harassment and swift counterattacks. A quirky tidbit: the battle is said to have involved thousands of camels used not only for transportation, but also as psychological weapons, their sheer numbers and unpredictable movements unsettling the heavy Byzantine troops. Another fascinating detail: at one point, a massive sandstorm sweeps across the battlefield, reducing visibility to almost nothing. This natural chaos plays to Khalid's advantage, allowing his forces to regroup and launch surprise assaults. Historians still debate the exact scale and tactics of the battle, with some arguing that the Muslim victory was as much due to Byzantine mismanagement and internal divisions as to Khalid's leadership. The battle rages for 6 days each, filled with brutal fighting and strategic maneuvers. On the final day, Khalid orchestrates a decisive cavalry charge that breaks the Byzantine lines, sending their troops into chaotic retreat. The victory at Yarmouk opens the doors to Syria for the Muslims, marking a turning point in the expansion of the Islamic State. Cities fall one after another, and the Byzantine grip on the Levant begins to loosen. You feel the weight of history here, not just in the clashing armies, but in the sweeping changes that follow. Borders shift, faiths mingle, and a new chapter begins. As you watch the dust settle over Yarmouk, you realize this is not just a military conquest, but a profound moment of transformation. And Khalid, the sword of God, rides on his name, etched forever into the sands of time. The air feels charged even as the heat presses down with a heavy hand. You follow Khalid's march eastward, away from the familiar hills of Syria, toward the vast plains of Mesopotamia, where the mighty Sassanid Empire awaits. This is a land of ancient rivers, fertile soil, and cities that have seen empires rise and fall like the ebb and flow of the Tigris and Euphrates. The Sassanids are formidable foes, experienced, disciplined, and well-equipped with cavalry, archers, and war elephants that loom like living fortresses. Their empire is vast, their court sophisticated, and their confidence in their armies unshakable. Yet here rides Khalid ibn al-Walid, unbowed and determined to press the early Muslim expansion into the heart of Persia. The strategic stakes are immense. Mesopotamia represents not only fertile land, but a cultural and economic prize, controlling vital trade routes, and ancient cities like Ctesiphon, the imperial capital. The Muslim armies, though smaller and less equipped, are energized by religious zeal and Khalid's tactical brilliance. You witness the early skirmishes, raids on supply lines, surprise attacks on outposts, and fierce engagements with Sassanid patrols. Khalid's forces use their mobility to offset the Sassanid advantages in numbers and heavy armor. Camels and horses dart across the plains, cutting off retreat paths and harassing enemy formations. A quirky tidbit: the Muslim cavalry reportedly employed hit-and-run tactics so effectively that Sassanid soldiers nicknamed them Ghost Riders, striking swiftly and disappearing before a counterattack could be mounted. Another detail: the Sassanids used war elephants extensively. These massive beasts, sometimes armored, were terrifying on the battlefield, capable of trampling infantry and breaking enemy lines. But their size also made them vulnerable to panicked stampedes, a fact Khalid would exploit in later battles. Historians still debate the exact timing and scale of the Muslim incursions into Sassanid territory. Some sources suggest multiple simultaneous fronts, with Khalid focusing on critical points to break the empire's cohesion. Your journey takes you closer to al-Qadisiyyah, a fortified town guarding the approach to Ctesiphon. The town is the site of the upcoming decisive battle, where two empires will clash with stakes Beyond mere land ideologies, faiths, and the future of the region hang in the balance. As you arrive, you notice the tension thickening like dust in the air. The Muslim army prepares meticulously under Khalid's watchful eye, while the Sassanid forces led by General Rostam Farrokhzad fortify their positions. The battle will test every ounce of Khalid's leadership and every grain of faith among his warriors. And you, dear listener, are there to witness it. The morning air over al-Qadisiyyah is thick with anticipation, and the scent of dry earth baked by the rising sun. You stand amid the assembled forces, the ground beneath scattered with the remnants of campfires and the clatter of armor being donned. This battle is unlike any before it. It is the tipping point between two great worlds, the fledgling Muslim state and the ancient Sassanid empire. Khalid ibn al-Walid, the famed Sword of God, surveys the battlefield with calm intensity. His men, battle-hardened, loyal, and fierce, ready themselves to face an enemy renowned for discipline and might. Across the field, Sassanid war elephants lumber ominously, their towering forms casting long shadows over the sands. Infantry and cavalry form disciplined ranks, their armor gleaming, their commanders shouting orders. The first clash is sudden and brutal. Swords ring against shields. Arrows whistle through the haze and the ground trembles under the charge of armored elephants. The Muslims, however, rely not on brute force alone, but on Khalid's mastery of swift cavalry maneuvers and flexible tactics. Their mobility becomes a critical asset as small units dart in and out of the enemy's reach, exploiting weaknesses and creating confusion. One quirky tidbit: the Sassanids were among the few ancient armies to use war elephants as shock troops, but the animals could become uncontrollable. It's said that during this battle, Muslim archers specifically targeted the mahouts, elephant riders, causing elephants to panic and trample their own troops, a dramatic if chaotic turn of events. Another curious fact: some Muslim soldiers reportedly carried sacred text into battle, believing that the words would shield them from harm. This blend of faith and warfare underscored the spiritual dimension of the conflict, where victory was seen not only as military success but as divine favor. Historians still debate the precise sequence of events at al-Qadisiyyah. Some accounts suggest the battle lasted several days, marked by fierce skirmishes and shifting momentum. Others emphasize the psychological toll, with both sides weary and desperate. The turning point came when Khalid orchestrated a daring flanking maneuver, exploiting gaps in the Sassanid lines. His cavalry charged with a ferocity that shattered enemy formations, sowing panic and disorder. The Sassanid general Rostam Farrokhzad was wounded in the fray, and his death dealt a heavy blow to morale. Your imagination catches a glimpse of the chaos: soldiers scrambling, war cries ringing out, elephants running wild, and Khalid rallying his troops with unyielding resolve. In the aftermath, the Sassanid forces retreated, and the path to Ctesiphon, the imperial capital, was left vulnerable. The victory at al-Qadisiyyah was not merely a military triumph, but a watershed moment signaling the decline of Sassanid power and the rise of a new order. Yet this was not the end of the story. The battle's toll was immense, and the challenges of governing and consolidating control over vast territories would test the young Islamic state's resilience. As you reflect on the battle, you understand that it was as much a clash of cultures, religions, and visions of governance as it was a contest of swords and spears. Khalid's campaigns reshaped the map, but they also set the stage for profound transformations in the centuries to come. And you, standing on the dusty plains, feel the weight of history pressing gently into your bones. The sun rises slowly over the vast expanse of Mesopotamian plains, casting long shadows across the battlefield, where al-Qadisiyyah's echoes still linger. You can almost hear the distant clamor of war horses, neighing swords clashing, the rumble of elephants stepping through the dust. Yet here, amidst the quiet aftermath, a new kind of tension begins to build, the challenge of turning victory into lasting control. The fall of the Sassanid forces at al-Qadisiyyah is monumental, but it is only the first step in a much larger campaign. The Muslim armies now set their sights on Ctesiphon, the glittering capital of the Persian Empire, a city rich with palaces, libraries, and ancient history. The city's walls are imposing and its defenders determined, but the momentum has shifted irreversibly. You watch as Khalid's forces advance cautiously. The once confident Sassanid soldiers have been dealt a psychological blow, and rumors of Rostam's death spread, sowing despair. Yet the campaign is far from over, and resistance remains fierce. A quirky tidbit, Ctesiphon was famed for its Tak Kasra, an enormous vaulted hall considered an architectural marvel. The Muslim conquerors, however, viewed such displays of opulence with ambivalence, sometimes sparing, and other times plundering such monuments, reflecting the complexities of conquest and cultural encounter. Another intriguing detail report suggests that during the siege, diplomatic negotiations were attempted with some local Persian nobles, choosing to submit peacefully rather than face destruction, illustrating the pragmatic and often nuanced nature of early Islamic expansions. Historians still argue over the exact timeline and tactics employed during the siege of Ctesiphon, with some accounts highlighting prolonged skirmishes and attrition warfare, while others emphasize swift victories facilitated by internal dissent within the city. As you envision the fall of Ctesiphon, you see not just a city conquered, but a turning point where the ancient Persian world begins to transform. Trade routes shift, administrative systems are adapted, and new cultural exchanges take root. This moment heralds the rise of a new power, one that will shape the Middle East for centuries. You feel the weight of transformation pressing through the dust and the ruins. And with Khalid's campaigns behind you, the story of conquest gives way to the story of empire-building, complex, fraught, and ongoing. The dust settles on the battlefield, but the echoes of war resonate through the cities, the markets, and the homes across the newly conquered lands. You watch as the vast, intricate machinery of empire building begins to churn, a daunting task, far more complex than the victories of sword and spear. Khalid ibn al-Walid's role in the military conquest is clear, but as the dust of battle fades, his place in the political and administrative reshaping of the conquered territories becomes less so. Soon after the victory at al-Qadisiyyah, Khalid is relieved of his command under controversial circumstances, replaced by commanders more attuned to governance and diplomacy. You ponder this moment, a brilliant battlefield commander sidelined during the fragile peace that follows. Historians still argue whether it was due to political rivalries, concerns over Khalid's growing power, or the caliph's desire to stabilize the regions with more moderate leadership. Meanwhile, the Muslim administration faces immense challenges integrating diverse populations, managing former enemies, and establishing new legal and religious frameworks. Cities like Damascus, Ctesiphon, and others begin to witness the merging of cultures, faiths, and traditions in unpredictable ways. A quirky tidbit: the early governors sometimes faced local revolts not only from former imperial loyalists, but also from factions within the Muslim ranks, highlighting the internal tensions of rapid expansion. Another fascinating detail: some conquered regions retained their bureaucratic systems, using existing Persian and Byzantine officials to maintain tax collection and order, illustrating a pragmatic approach to governance. Amid these transformations, trade flourishes along new routes connecting the Arabian Peninsula to the Mediterranean, Persia, and beyond. The fusion of cultures enriches art, science, and philosophy, setting the stage for the golden age of Islam. Yet, for the soldiers on the ground, the shift from war to peace is complex. Veterans of relentless campaigns now grapple with civilian life and the uncertainties of empire. You imagine Khalid famed yet sidelined, reflecting on his legacy as the dust of war settles. His sword remains legendary, but the story of conquest is only one part of a much larger saga, the story of how an empire grows, adapts, and endures. And you are there to witness it all. The vast plains and ancient cities of the Middle East now hum with a different kind of energy. Where once only armies clashed, new systems take root, laws written, governors appointed, marketplaces bustling with traders from distant lands. The early Muslim expansion is no longer solely about battlefield glory. It is a complex process of state building, culture melding, and religious transformation. You find yourself amidst this dynamic period where Arab conquerors and local populations navigate an uneasy but productive coexistence. The Islamic State, though young, begins to adopt administrative practices from the very empires it displaced, blending them with its own emerging identity. One quirky tidbit: the Muslim rulers continue to use the Sassanid tax system, including its detailed bureaucracy and coinage designs, but gradually infused it with Islamic symbolism and terminology, creating a unique blend of old and new. Another fascinating detail: Arabic gradually replaces Greek and Middle Persian as the administrative language, a transition that takes decades and sparks debate among scholars and officials alike about identity and authority. Historians still argue about how quickly and smoothly these transitions occurred. Some emphasize pragmatic adaptation and tolerance. Others highlight conflicts, resistance, and the challenges of imposing new religious laws on diverse populations. Amid these shifts, cities like Kufa and Basra rise as new centers of learning and culture, attracting scholars, poets, and theologians who will shape Islamic civilization for centuries. You picture marketplaces filled with spices, textiles, and manuscripts, mosques under construction, scholars debating theology under the shade of palm trees. Meanwhile, the political landscape remains volatile. Power struggles within the Islamic leadership foreshadow the eventual divisions between Sunni and Shia Islam, underscoring that the unity forged in battle will soon face internal challenges. As you watch these developments unfold, you understand that conquest was just the opening act. The real story is about how the ideas, laws, and cultures of this expanding empire grow, adapt, and influence the world. And Khalid's sword, though sheathed, has carved a path none can forget. The desert sun sinks low, casting long shadows across the shifting sands as you contemplate the ripples of change set in motion by the early Muslim expansions. While the armies carve their mark on the land, the battle for hearts, minds, and souls quietly took shape behind the scenes. You find yourself in a bustling city, Kufa newly founded but already a melting pot of cultures, languages, and beliefs. Here, amidst the call to prayer and the hum of daily life, theological debates begin to echo. Scholars and believers grapple with profound questions. What does it mean to live under Islamic rule? How should the Quran be interpreted? Who has the right to lead the community? The political unity forged on the battlefield soon faces its first fissures. Different interpretations of Islam, compounded by ethnic, tribal, and political differences, lay the groundwork for tensions that will shape the region's future for centuries. A quirky tidbit: the early Islamic courts sometimes incorporated elements of Byzantine and Persian legal traditions, blending them with Islamic law Sharia to govern diverse populations. Another fascinating detail: poetry flourished in these early days, with poets praising victories, eulogizing fallen heroes, and exploring spiritual themes, preserving the oral traditions of the Arabs, even as the written word gained prominence. Historians still debate how much Khalid ibn al-Walid influenced these cultural and political transformations after his dismissal from command. While his military genius is undisputed, his role in governance remains less clear, though his legacy inspired generations. You walk the streets of Kufa and Basra feeling the pulse of an empire not only expanding geographically, but also culturally and intellectually. The dawn of Islamic civilization is underway, fueled by faith conquest and a rich tapestry of human experience. And as the stars emerge over the desert, you realize that this story, like all stories worth telling, is still unfolding. The landscape shifts again as you continue your journey, the familiar golden sands giving way to the fertile crescent's green expanses, winding rivers and ancient cities steeped in history. Here in the heart of the former Sassanid Empire, the aftermath of the great battles reverberates far beyond the clashing swords and fallen warriors. The early Muslim expansion has entered a new phase one where conquest must give way to consolidation governance and cultural transformation. You find yourself amid the ruins and remnants of what was once a vast imperial capital. Ctesiphon, a city that embodies centuries of Persian power art and administration. The city, though battered by war, still holds traces of imperial grandeur. Its famed Takhasra, a massive arched hall, still looms as a testament to Persian architectural ingenuity. As Muslim forces establish control, they face the daunting task of integrating a population with deeply rooted cultural, religious, and political traditions. The Sassanids had ruled with a sophisticated bureaucracy, a state religion centered on Zoroastrianism, and an elite nobility keen on preserving their privileges. The arrival of a new ruling power shakes these foundations. One quirky tidbit: early Muslim administrators retained many Sassanid officials valuing their expertise in tax collection, irrigation, and local governance. It's as if the conquerors recognized that effective empire building required more than swords, it demanded knowledge and continuity. Another fascinating detail: Persian influence begins to weave into Islamic culture, with Persian scholars, poets, and bureaucrats contributing to the emerging Islamic Golden Age. The fusion of Arab and Persian cultures would become one of the most vibrant features of the medieval Islamic world. However, the transition is far from seamless. Religious tensions simmer beneath the surface. Zoroastrians, Christians, Jews, and new Muslim converts navigate complex relationships with the new rulers. The imposition of jizya, a tax levied on non-Muslims, both formalizes social hierarchies and fosters resentment. Historians still debate how the early Islamic state balanced tolerance and authority, with some portraying a pragmatic approach that allowed religious minorities to maintain autonomy, while others highlight episodes of coercion and conflict. Meanwhile, the Islamic military campaigns continue. Beyond Mesopotamia, the frontiers extend into Egypt, North Africa, and further east, propelled by leaders inspired by Khalid's legacy, but adapting to new challenges. You pause to reflect on the logistical marvel this expansion represents: armies moving across deserts and river cities, adapting to new rulers' cultures, blending in unexpected ways. The early Muslim state is no longer just a conquering force. It is an evolving civilization. This transformation lays the groundwork for a flourishing of knowledge, science, art, and philosophy that will echo through history. As twilight descends, you see the flicker of lanterns in distant cities, hear the murmur of new prayers, and sense the quiet promise of a world being remade. And through it all, Khalid's sword remains a symbol, not just of war, but of the profound changes forged in its wake. The desert night wraps around you like a velvet cloak as you step into the bustling streets of newly conquered cities, Kufa, Basra, and beyond. The air is thick with the sense of spices, burning oil lamps, and the quiet murmur of prayers and commerce. The early Muslim expansion has opened a vast stage for a story not only of military conquest, but of cultural fusion, intellectual blossoming, and the weaving of new identities from old threads. You find yourself in Kufa, a city founded as a military encampment, but swiftly transformed into a vibrant urban center. It is a city of contrast tent camps and brick houses, desert traditions mingling with ancient Mesopotamian heritage. Here soldiers mingle with merchants, scholars debate theology in crowded mosques, and the lines between conquerors and conquered begin to blur. The formation of such cities marks a turning point in the expansion. No longer just transient armies, the Muslims are establishing administrative centers, building infrastructures, and fostering communities. This process demands political savvy tolerance and a vision that extends beyond the battlefield. A quirky tidbit: early governors appointed by the caliphate sometimes maintained Byzantine and Persian administrative frameworks, adapting rather than dismantling existing systems. This pragmatism allowed for efficient tax collection and governance, while slowly introducing Islamic legal principles. Another fascinating detail: Arabic, initially a tribal and oral language, begins its rise as the language of administration, poetry, and scholarship. The development of the Arabic script and the formalization of grammar reflect the empire's expanding cultural ambitions. Within Kufa and Basra, theological debates ignite. The Quran, newly codified, becomes the focal point for interpretation and law, giving rise to diverse schools of thought. These debates are not only religious but political, intertwining with questions of leadership and authority. Historians still argue about the origins of the Sunni-Shia split, which finds early roots in disputes over succession and legitimacy within the rapidly expanding Muslim community. These divisions will shape the political and religious landscape for centuries. You observe the daily life of citizens, traders, bartering silk and spices, poets reciting verses under moonlit courtyards, scholars copying manuscripts illuminated by flickering lamps. The early Islamic civilization is taking form, a civilization rich in diversity, innovation, and complexity. Yet the rapid expansion brings challenges. Conflicts flare along frontiers, local revolts challenge authority, and questions of identity and belonging weigh heavily on the people. You witness the early caliphate grappling with these issues, striving to balance conquest with compassion, faith with pragmatism, and unity with diversity. As the stars wheel overhead, you feel the pulse of a civilization in motion, its foundations laid by warriors like Khalid, but built by thinkers, leaders, and everyday people weaving their stories into the fabric of history. And so the story continues unfolding, evolving, and inviting you to listen. The sun sets over the desert horizon, and the quiet hum of daily life mingles with the faint echoes of past battles. You find yourself drifting from the bustling streets of the cities into the desert plains, once again tracing the path of a campaign that few remember in detail, but that shaped the future of a vast region, the campaign at al-Yarmouk. This battle, often overshadowed by others, is pivotal. It is here that the Muslim armies under the command of Khalid ibn al-Walid confront the Byzantine Empire in a confrontation that will redefine the power balance in the Near East. You picture the vast encampment stretching across the plains, thousands of soldiers gathered under banners fluttering in the desert breeze. The Muslim forces, though numerically smaller, are fiercely determined. Their cavalry moves with precision, their infantry discipline, despite the heat and exhaustion. The Byzantines, by contrast, rely on their superior numbers, heavily armored infantry, and war elephants. Their commanders are seasoned veterans, confident in their ability to repel the advancing forces. A quirky tidbit: the battle reportedly involved elephants equipped with armor and tusk blades, turning them into living tanks that could wreak havoc on enemy lines. Another interesting detail: despite their military prowess, the Byzantine forces were hampered by internal disputes and logistical challenges, factors that Khalid and his commanders exploited through swift, coordinated strikes. Historians still debate the exact tactics employed at Yarmouk, with some sources highlighting Khalid's innovative use of mobile cavalry units to outflank and disrupt the Byzantine formations. The battle rages for 6 days, a brutal contest marked by shifting momentum, fierce hand-to-hand combat, and the unpredictable fury of the desert winds. On the final day, Khalid leads a decisive charge that breaks the Byzantine lines, sending their forces into disarray and retreat. The victory at Yarmouk opens the door to the Levant for the Muslims, leading to the swift conquest of Syria and surrounding regions. Yet the battle is not merely military. It signals a profound cultural and religious shift, the gradual transformation of the Near East under Islamic rule. As the dust settles, you feel the weight of history, the moment when empires fall and new worlds rise. And through it all, Khalid rides in his legacy, etched into the sands. The glow of dawn reveals the sprawling plains, where countless warriors once clashed, and as the wind stirs the dry earth, you feel the lingering presence of a campaign both fierce and fateful. Khalid ibn al-Walid, the Sword of God, has earned a reputation that stretches far beyond the deserts, but now his path turns toward a new theater, the heart of Persia, and the monumental battle at al-Qadisiyyah. Here the stakes are monumental. The Sassanid Empire, ancient and proud, stands as the last great obstacle to the expanding Muslim state. Their armies are vast and formidable, bolstered by war elephants, heavily armored cavalry, and disciplined infantry. The confrontation promises to be one of the defining moments of the early Islamic conquests. You walk among Khalid's troops as they prepare. The soldiers are a mosaic of desert warriors, tribal fighters, and recent converts united by faith and forged by hardship. Yet beneath their resolve there is a palpable tension, knowing they face a mighty foe with centuries of military tradition behind them. A quirky tidbit. The Sassanid war elephants, often armored and trained for battle, were a terrifying sight, but could be as much a liability as an asset. Reports tell of incidents where panicked elephants trampled their own ranks, causing chaos amid the disciplined formations. Another fascinating detail to counter the elephants, the Muslim forces employed specialized tactics, including archers, targeting the mahouts, elephant riders, and units armed with loud noises and fire to spook the beasts. The battle unfolds over several days, a relentless test of endurance, strategy, and will. Khalid's leadership shines as he coordinates swift cavalry strikes, feints, and flanking maneuvers that unsettle the larger Sassanid forces. Historians still debate many aspects of al-Qadisiyyah, the exact size of the armies, the sequence of engagements, and the role of individual commanders. But consensus holds that the Muslim victory was decisive and opened the path to the Sassanid heartland. You glimpse the moment when General Rostam Farrokhzad, the Sassanid commander, falls in battle, his death a blow that shatters the morale of his troops and tips the scales irrevocably. The aftermath is profound. With the Sassanid military broken, the Islamic State's influence extends into Mesopotamia, reshaping the political and cultural landscape. Khalid, though later dismissed from command, leaves behind a legacy of military genius and religious zeal that reverberates through the centuries. You watch as the desert wind sweeps over the battlefield, carrying away the dust of war, but never the memory. The desert wind carries whispers of change as you move eastward beyond the battlefields and into the heart of what was once the vast and mighty Sassanid Empire. The dust of conflict is beginning to settle, but the challenges for the early Muslim conquerors are only just unfolding. Conquest may have opened the gates, but the true test lies in governing and transforming the diverse lands and peoples now under Islamic rule. You find yourself walking the bustling streets of Ctesiphon, the imperial capital nestled on the banks of the Tigris River. Its palaces and grand halls bear the scars of war, but their imposing presence remains a testament to centuries of Persian power and culture. Here, the Caliphal administrators face an intricate puzzle how to integrate a complex and long established civilization into the rapidly expanding Islamic State. This moment marks the beginning of a fascinating and complex period where culture, religion, politics, and administration intertwine. The Muslim commanders and new governors understand that simply imposing new rule will not suffice. The Sassanid lands are home to multiple faiths: Zoroastrians, Christians, Jews, and a scattering of pagan groups and traditions that span centuries. Respecting these while asserting authority demands tact and flexibility. You notice that early Islamic governance exhibits remarkable pragmatism. Many existing Persian bureaucrats are retained in their posts, valued for their expertise in taxation, irrigation, and local governance. These officials, though from a different religious and cultural background, become vital collaborators in managing the sprawling empire. A quirky tidbit: early Islamic coinage in these regions bears the fascinating imprint of cultural synthesis. Coins retain familiar Sassanid imagery but incorporate Islamic inscriptions and symbols, reflecting a deliberate blend designed to ease transition and legitimize new authority. This administrative continuity does not mean wholesale preservation. The Islamic leadership gradually replaces Persian and Byzantine legal frameworks with Sharia, the Islamic law derived from the Quran and Hadith. This legal transformation unfolds over decades, sometimes clashing with entrenched customs and sparking debates among scholars and local leaders. Another fascinating detail: the Arabic language begins its gradual rise as the official medium of administration, scholarship, and culture. This linguistic shift, far from immediate, challenges both administrators and populations accustomed to Greek, Persian, or Aramaic. The process requires new educational institutions, scribes trained in Arabic, and a cultural flowering that will ultimately produce some of the world's greatest poets, philosophers, and scientists. Yet the road to cultural integration is far from smooth. Resistance simmers. Some communities chafe under the jizya, a tax imposed on non-Muslims, while others resent the changes to social hierarchies. Revolts and localized conflicts flare intermittently, reminding the conquerors that rule by sword does not guarantee peace. In the cities, religious life is both vibrant and contested. Mosques emerge alongside churches and fire temples. Religious scholars debate theology with fervor, helping shape the spiritual landscape that will define the region for centuries. The early formation of Sunni and Shia branches of Islam is underway, rooted in disputes over leadership and authority, but entwined with social and political realities. The cultural exchanges between Arabs and Persians foster unprecedented intellectual growth. Persian scholars translate Greek and Indian works, preserving and expanding knowledge in medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. This era will come to be known as the Islamic Golden Age. You find yourself walking alongside traders and artisans who weave Persian motifs into Arab designs, producing beautiful ceramics, textiles, and calligraphy. The fusion of art and culture is a tangible expression of the empire's evolving identity. Historians still debate the extent to which the early Islamic state was a continuation of earlier empires versus a radical new order. Some see it as a pragmatic adaptation of existing structures, while others highlight its revolutionary religious and social ideals. Through it all, Khalid ibn al-Walid's legacy endures, not just in the victories he won, but in the territories he helped bring under Islamic influence. Though sidelined from later political life, his military campaigns laid the groundwork for this vast transformation. You reflect on the monumental scope of these changes, from desert warriors to city governors, from oral traditions to written scholarship, from tribal allegiances to imperial administration. The story of early Muslim expansion is a tapestry woven with threads of faith, power, culture, and human ambition. As twilight descends, the lights of new cities flicker alive their glow, promising a future built on the complex legacy of conquest and coexistence. And you standing at this crossroads of history feel the weight and wonder of a civilization awakening. The sun dips low behind the distant hills as you wander through the bustling markets of Kufa and Basra cities, born from the dust and valor of conquest. The early Islamic Empire has burst from the deserts and battlefields into the realm of cities, culture, and political intrigue. But with conquest comes a new set of challenges of governance, identity, and unity. You witness the lively streets where traders barter silk and spices, where poets recite verses that weave faith and history into melody. Yet beneath this vibrancy lie tensions, tribal loyalties, theological debates, and political factions competing for influence. The caliphal authority, while unifying, is far from uncontested. The early Muslim community grapples with defining leadership, the scope of religious law, and relations with non-Muslim subjects. These debates foreshadow the divisions that will later crystallize into Sunni and Shia branches of Islam. A quirky tidbit: early Islamic legal scholars, known as the Qadis, begin to systematize Sharia law, but their rulings often reflect a delicate balance between tribal customs and Quranic principles, sometimes leading to surprising verdicts that seem tailor-made to local circumstances. Another intriguing detail, the tradition of Majlis councils, where leaders and elders debate matters of public concern, flourishes in these cities, blending pre-Islamic Arab customs with Islamic governance models. You find yourself at the heart of a theological debate. Scholars discuss the nature of the imamate, the rightful leadership of the Muslim community. Supporters of Ali, the Prophet's cousin and son-in-law, advocate for his spiritual and political authority, sowing seeds of what will become Shia Islam. Meanwhile, others champion the caliphs elected through consensus, the foundations of Sunni Islam. These divisions are not merely theological. They reflect deeper social and political realities, tribal affiliations, and visions for the future of the empire. The vibrant intellectual life of the cities nurtures the arts and sciences. The translation movement begins preserving ancient Greek, Persian, and Indian knowledge. Medical texts, philosophical treatises, and astronomical works find new audiences, contributing to a flowering of civilization. Yet rapid expansion strains the empire's resources. Frontier regions rebel or resist new taxation. Administrators struggle to impose order over vast, diverse populations. You imagine the tireless governors, merchants, soldiers, and scholars navigating this complex web, their actions shaping the future of the Islamic world. Historians still debate how much early Islamic governance relied on continuity versus innovation, how the empire balanced religious ideals with political pragmatism, and how diverse communities negotiated identity under the new order. Amid this flux, the legacy of Khalid ibn al-Walid remains potent. His military successes laid the foundation, but the evolving empire demands new skills, diplomacy, administration, and theological leadership. As night falls, the cities glow with lanterns and life. The scent of incense mingles with the murmurs of prayer, poetry, and debate. You sense that this is not an end, but a beginning of cultures, mingling ideas, clashing and blending in a civilization finding its voice. And as stars blanket the sky, you feel privileged to witness this unfolding story, complex, contested, and profoundly human. The night deepens and the stars ignite the sky like scattered diamonds, guiding your journey deeper into the heart of the early Islamic Empire's unfolding saga. From the deserts where Khalid ibn al-Walid once commanded his forces, you now traverse sprawling cities, lush river valleys, and frontier lands pulsing with life and tension. The conquests have reshaped borders, but the fabric of society requires careful weaving. Governance, culture, religion, and identity swirl together in a complex dance, as the new rulers confront the challenge of ruling a diverse empire that stretches from the Arabian Peninsula through the Levant and into Mesopotamia. In cities like Kufa and Basra, you feel the energy of a world in transition. Scholars and jurists debate the interpretation of sacred texts. Merchants build networks that stretch across continents, and artists begin to craft the vibrant tapestry of Islamic culture. Yet alongside this vibrant growth, simmer disputes over succession authority and the very nature of Islamic leadership. A quirky tidbit: the early Islamic courts sometimes incorporated legal concepts borrowed from Byzantine and Sassanid traditions, creating a hybrid system that balanced religious law with practical governance, a fascinating example of cultural adaptation. Another intriguing detail: Arabic poetry flourished with poets weaving religious themes into classical forms, preserving pre-Islamic oral traditions while celebrating the new faith's triumphs. Historians still debate the origins and causes of the Sunni-Shia split, which begins to crystallize in this period. The question of rightful leadership, whether authority should remain within the Prophet's family or be determined by the wider community-fueled tensions that echo through centuries. You observe that the Caliphate also grapples with integrating non-Arab populations. The policy of Arabization and the gradual spread of Islam involve negotiation and gradual cultural shifts, not simple imposition. Along the frontiers, military expeditions continue. The conquest of Egypt and parts of North Africa opens new chapters, bringing diverse peoples and traditions into the fold. You follow caravans laden with goods, scholars carrying manuscripts, and warriors moving ever onward. But with expansion comes complexity. Local revolts, ethnic tensions, and theological disputes remind the rulers that control is never absolute. You watch as early Islamic scholars codify laws, theological schools emerge, and debates over jurisprudence shape the contours of the faith. In this crucible of culture and politics, the empire begins to take on the richness and complexity that will define it for centuries. You reflect on how the legacy of conquest intersects with the delicate work of statecraft faith and cultural synthesis. As dawn approaches, the horizon brightens with promise and uncertainty, echoing the journey of a civilization in flux. And through it all, the echoes of Khalid ibn al-Walid's sword remind you of the forces that set this great transformation in motion. The soft light of dawn spills across the desert as you journey onward, now tracing the ripples left in the wake of Khalid ibn al-Walid's campaigns and the expanding Islamic Empire. The battlefields have quieted, but the echoes of conquest reverberate through the cities, the countryside, and the hearts of those who lived through upheaval and change. You find yourself standing before the sprawling ruins of once great Byzantine cities, ancient fortresses and bustling ports that now fall under new rule. The balance of power in the region has shifted dramatically, and new trade routes, cultural exchanges, and political alliances are forming in response. The early Islamic State is no longer just a military entity, but a complex empire, grappling with its identity and the challenges of governance across diverse peoples. A quirky tidbit: many of the early Muslim commanders and governors were remarkably open to incorporating local customs and administrative practices. In Egypt, for example, Coptic officials continued to play key roles in tax collection and governance under the new regime. Another fascinating detail: the early Islamic Empire maintained a degree of religious tolerance toward Christians, Jews, and Zoroastrians, recognizing them as people of the book and allowing them to practice their faiths in exchange for paying the jizya tax. Historians still debate the extent to which this tolerance was motivated by pragmatism, religious principle, or political necessity, and how it influenced the empire's stability. Meanwhile, the cultural landscape flourished. Cities like Baghdad, founded later but rooted in this period's expansion, would become centers of learning and innovation. Philosophers translated and preserved Greek, Persian, and Indian texts advancing medicine, mathematics, and astronomy. You imagine the scholars poring over manuscripts by candlelight, the merchants exchanging silks and spices, and the poets weaving verses, celebrating both ancient traditions and the new faith. Yet even as the empire thrives, internal conflicts simmer. Succession disputes, tribal rivalries, and theological disagreements threaten unity. You reflect on the delicate balance between conquest and governance, faith, and power, tradition, and innovation. And through it all, the shadow of Khalid's sword remains a symbol of both the empire's turbulent beginnings and its enduring legacy. The desert sun sinks low, and the quiet of evening settles over the vast lands once bathed in the blood and sweat of conquest. Yet the story of early Muslim expansion is far from over. You stand now at the crossroads of history where the echoes of Khalid ibn al-Walid's sword mingle with the ambitions, struggles, and dreams of generations to come. The early Islamic conquest carved a vast empire, but they also planted seeds of cultural transformation, religious diversity, and political complexity that would shape the Middle East and beyond for centuries. You walk along the ancient trade routes paths, trodden by camel caravans laden with spices, silk, and knowledge. These routes connect the cities that now hum with life: Damascus, Kufa, Basra, and the soon-to-be founded Baghdad. Here, merchants, scholars, soldiers, and poets mingle, sharing ideas that will ignite a cultural renaissance. A quirky tidbit: the early Islamic Empire, despite its rapid military expansion, placed great value on knowledge preservation. It assimilated the scientific works of Greeks, Persians, and Indians, translating texts that had been forgotten or lost in the West. Another fascinating detail: Arabic, initially a tribal language, became the lingua franca across the empire, facilitating communication and cultural cohesion, while adapting and evolving to absorb new vocabulary and concepts. Historians still debate the degree to which the early conquests were driven by religious zeal versus political and economic motivations. Some argue that the spread of Islam was as much about statecraft and diplomacy as it was about faith, highlighting the pragmatic nature of early Muslim rulers. As you observe the vibrant urban centers, you notice the rise of new architectural styles, the construction of mosques that blend Persian, Byzantine, and Arabian influences, and the flourishing of arts that reflect a syncretism of traditions. Yet beneath this cultural efflorescence, tensions simmer. Succession crises emerge after the deaths of the first caliphs, culminating in conflicts that will shape Islamic political thought. The Sunni-Shia divide, born in debates over rightful leadership, begins to crystallize with lasting implications. You reflect on the delicate balancing act of empire building, how conquering armies become governing bodies, how faith must accommodate diversity, and how power requires negotiation and compromise. The legacy of Khalid ibn al-Walid looms large not only as a military commander, but as a catalyst for a vast historical transformation. As the stars blanket the night sky, you understand that this story is both an ending and a beginning, a tapestry woven from the threads of conquest, faith, culture, and human endeavor. And as you settle beneath the quiet sky, you feel the profound weight and wonder of history's relentless march. The desert night wraps around you like a vast velvety canopy studded with stars, each a silent witness to the countless footsteps that have traversed these ancient lands. The wind carries the whispers of armies, scholars, merchants, and poets, weaving them into a story that is still unfolding. You stand on the threshold of history's vast tapestry, ready to trace the final threads of the early Muslim expansion, its echoes, its legacies, and its enduring mysteries. Khalid ibn al-Walid's sword, once a symbol of swift and decisive conquest, now lies sheathed beneath the sands of time. but its imprint remains indelible, etched not only into the battlefields, but into the hearts and minds of a civilization in flux. As the newly forged empire stretches from the Arabian deserts through the Levant and into the fertile crescent of Mesopotamia, the transformation from conquerors to governors, from tribesmen to citizens, unfolds with complexity and nuance. You find yourself walking the streets of the burgeoning cities, Kufa, Basra, Damascus, where the air hums with the clatter of trade, the murmur of prayers, and the vibrant debates of scholars. These urban centers are the crucibles of a new culture, one born from the fusion of Arab, Persian, Byzantine, and countless other traditions. A quirky tidbit: the early Islamic Empire's remarkable translation movement is underway, where scholars labor tirelessly to render Greek philosophical texts, Persian scientific treatises, and Indian mathematical works into Arabic, preserving and enriching human knowledge. Another fascinating detail: Islamic art and architecture begin to blossom, blending geometric patterns, calligraphy, and influences from conquered peoples, giving rise to styles that will inspire generations. Yet the political landscape is anything but stable. The deaths of the first caliphs unleash succession crises, civil wars, and sectarian strife that will shape the contours of Islamic history. The split between Sunni and Shia Islam takes root in deeply contested interpretations of rightful leadership, legacy, and community. You observe how these divisions are not mere theological disputes, but intertwined with tribal affiliations, social dynamics, and power struggles that ripple through the empire. The administration itself evolves, balancing religious law with pragmatic governance. Governors wield authority over diverse populations, navigating local customs, legal pluralism, and the demands of distant caliphal authority. You reflect on the challenges faced by the empire, integrating vast territories, managing cultural and religious diversity, and fostering a sense of unity amid difference. Trade routes thrive, connecting the empire to distant lands: India, China, Africa, and Europe. Goods, ideas, and technologies flow along the Silk Road and maritime pathways, weaving the Islamic world into the broader currents of global history. The scholars you meet debate philosophy, medicine, astronomy, and theology, setting the stage for the remarkable flowering of knowledge known as the Islamic Golden Age. But beneath the grandeur lie tensions: rebellion, sectarian violence, and the constant negotiation of identity in a sprawling empire. You see the resilience and creativity of peoples adapting to new realities, preserving traditions while embracing change. And as you gaze across the desert, the vastness of history and human endeavor becomes clear: a story of conquest, faith, culture, and continuity. Khalid's sword may have carved the path, but it is the lives of countless others, warriors, governors, poets, scholars, and everyday people that wove the rich tapestry of the Islamic civilization. You feel the weight of their footsteps, the echoes of their voices, and the unending pulse of history flowing beneath your feet. And as the stars wheel overhead, you close your eyes, carrying their story softly within you, knowing that history is never truly silent. And now, let the stillness settle softly around you, like the quiet embrace of desert night after the day's heat has passed. You've traveled across centuries and sands, from fierce battles to bustling cities, from the sharp strike of Khalid's sword to the gentle unfolding of culture, faith, and knowledge. The stories you've heard of warriors and scholars, of empires rising and falling, aren't just echoes of the past. They are threads that weave into the fabric of the present, reminding you that history lives in the quiet moments as much as in the clamor of conquest. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Feel the weight of the ancient desert air, the rustle of silk trading caravans, the murmur of prayers beneath starlit skies. Let these images soften, folding into a gentle calm as your breath slows and your mind drifts. The sword that once carved new borders now rests its legacy alive, not in violence, but in transformation in the hearts of those who carry the stories forward. Remember, history is not merely a record of what was, but a conversation across time. The past waits patiently in the shadows, ready to speak when we listen. So, as you settle deeper into rest, know that the journey is never truly over. The sands of time continue to shift, new stories rise, and I will be here with another tale for you tomorrow night. Sleep well, dream softly, and when you wake, the world will hold new stories waiting to be discovered.